So, Bronte, the real question is, do you believe a man can fly?
I do. I think that probably zero people who are watching or listening to this get that reference, but it's one instead of zero because I get it.
Yeah, which, everybody, this is an important question to ask because it is going to be in the future, and Bronte is going to be coming back for a Superman discussion because it's his favorite movie. But we're not doing that tonight, admittedly. But like with me and Lord of the Rings and Kira, I'm sure it'll find its way into the conversation because we may not be able to help ourselves. But we're actually going to be talking about the Disney classic, The Little Mermaid, tonight, whenever you're watching this. But I want to give a big hello to both Mr. Bronsterys himself, John or Bronte. There's multiple Johns here on tonight, and also welcoming back as well, Kate, who we are looking at through a porthole.
Very cinematic of me, right?
Yeah.
Right? Totally on purpose.
But is it Kate or is it Ariel?
I think you know the answer to that question.
Because it's the same picture.
I'm obviously a mermaid. I've been preparing for 3 weeks. I'm a method actor. I've been living under the sea, trying to really get myself in the headspace. What would Ariel do? So I dyed my hair red. I surgically grafted my legs together, and I now have a tail. But you'll never know because you can't actually see below.
What Ariel would do for most of the movie would not translate very well to a podcast because she wouldn't be speaking.
She'd be singing, and there'd be a lot of copyright strikes.
But not while she didn't have her voice.
Yeah.
I want to say I find it utterly not completely hilarious because I'm sad too, but Amy wasn't able to join us because of scheduling and a whole bunch of stuff. But I feel like this is a movie that she would be primed to go off in several different directions about but she is just going to have to be a spectator on this occasion and be like, but no, I want to interject. But we'll try and do that for her. But also, I think all three of us just unabashedly love this movie. And while we will get into that stuff, there's also just the singing and the outrageous fun that this movie contains. And it's funny because it's not the Disney movie that I've watched the most. My favorite is definitely Beauty and the Beast. I think a lot of people know that, but it's never not like a complete and utter joy to revisit this. But yeah, Kate, we'll just start with you. What's your Little Mermaid experience?
I feel like I have a very different Little Mermaid experience than most people because, to the best of my knowledge, I was 18 when I first watched this movie. So we might have had it when I was a kid. And if we did, I don't remember. I don't remember watching it. I was under the impression that I hadn't seen it until I went to university. And then I watched that. And Aladdin was the same situation. So within my first year of university, I watched Little Mermaid and Aladdin. I, too, was a Beauty and the Beast stan. So, and I also really loved the movies that had a lot of animals. So, the Aristocats and the Rescuers and some of these other, not quite Renaissance movies, like a little bit older. But I hadn't even seen it. And so, but it's funny, watching it for the first time as an adult is a completely different experience than most kids have. But also watching it as an even older adult with different filters now, cinematic, artistic, technical, feminist filters now. I'm just like, whoa, this movie's not even what I thought it was when I was 18. So it's an interesting one for me.
Yeah, it's because I did see this when I was a little kid. I went to the movie theater and saw it. And even though I don't remember what my exact experience was, there's a vibe that you remember of seeing something as a kid and going to like Disney, and like just the legacy of a movie like this that builds up over the years, even if you don't watch it all the time. But yeah, it is, it's interesting coming to it as an adult.
And only as an adult. So I have no nostalgia for it in the way that a lot of people do. I just love it as an adult, as opposed to, oh my God, this is my favorite movie when I was a kid. For me, that's Beauty and the Beast.
Now, and I just want to take a minute, actually, because I have referred to you as so many different names just on the stream already. How do you want me to address you?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I think Bronte works great because
Bronte,
you're John.
okay.
You're John. I'm Bronte. It'll be a lot less confusing that way. Yeah.
Yeah, because I am constantly going back and forth. Even in my head, I go Bronte, John B. So it's
anything you want, but I think Bronte will be the simplest for everyone else because that way it won't be John and John.
Okay, cool. Bronte, so what when you came on for the Little Mermaid? We're on the Little Mermaid stream right now. It was another Little. That's how I got them confused. When you came on to talk about Little Women, I think that's when we got into talking about like favorite movies and stuff, and you were very much talking about this film. So just Unleashed. Tell me, well, why do you love it so much?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, actually, to answer the question you asked Kate about my initial experience with it, I mean, so much of the culture is influenced now by these animated movies. Like you think of Frozen, right? How much of a cultural impact is Frozen had? And all of these movies started basically in the modern era with this one, right? With The Little Mermaid. There just hadn't been for a very long time anything like it. And then this movie comes out and it launches all these others, Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Lion King and Pocahontas and Mulan, and on and on and on. Ultimately, Frozen. And so, and you could even argue that non-Disney animated movies sort of owe themselves to what Disney showed, which is that you can make these kinds of movies and they would be very, very successful, critically acclaimed, popular. So, it started with this. So I saw this in a theater like you did, John, and it was mind-blowing to me. Like I had never seen anything like this before. And I saw Under the Sea, and I was just like, what? That can happen in a movie? Like I had a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I saw the movie with my sister in a theater. And after the movie ended, we were just sitting there blown away. And we said to each other, you want to just keep sitting here and watch it again? And we did. The one time in my life I've ever done that was with this movie.
Yeah. Again, like it's funny because I can't really remember all the way back. It's funny with stuff like this. I think especially if you were a real little kid going to the movies to see it, you remember like fragments and feelings rather than like the actual like experience. And so I don't really remember being a kid and like finding this to be a new thing, because when did this come out? It was I think 89. So I was only 5 years old when it came out.
I was in utero when this came out. I'm the youngest on the stream, so there you go.
So yeah, like and the year before this, even though it wasn't a Disney movie, there was and not a musical, but music played a part in it, was The Land Before Time. So I think I grew up seeing like, really great animated films. So in a way, like the Disney Renaissance could not have hit at a better time, because that's when I was growing up. And so it was great to be exposed to these at that age. And then it all got mixed in with all the other like older Disney animated musicals. And so it's such a big part of my childhood and what I love. But the greatest thing in the world was rediscovering movies like this, because I had sort of moved away from Disney for a number of years, and not to get sort of go to a downer note, but about little over 10 years ago, nearing almost 15, my parents were going through a tough time. They had gotten separated, and so I had delved like back into like childhood things, and I really rediscovered Disney in a big way, and I have been obsessed ever since, like in a way that I probably wasn't even when I was a kid. And so like especially the Disney Renaissance. So Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, those especially, because those are the ones I grew up with. I rediscovered them and just fell in love with them so much. And yeah, you mentioned Under the Sea, Bronte. Like I just watching it again today, I got the biggest smile on my face when Sebastian starts singing that, and it's great. And even simple things like, for some reason, that sort of reflective light on the surface of the ocean floor is very nostalgic to me, because it's a sort of touchstone of the animation of this film, and what they were conveying with everything being under the sea. So yeah, I just, even though it's not the one that I rewatch the most often, I still love this movie dearly.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point you make about the reflective light. I was thinking about that or a similar thing at the very beginning of the movie, in the credits, before you really get to the to the first under the sea scene, where they take you under the sea. I think the first thing you see is birds flying, and then but ultimately, right, you see the ship, and then you see the fish go into the water, and the fish goes down, 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 and down, and the credits roll, and the music, this beautiful kind of eerie in a beautiful way instrumental music starts playing, and
you get the vocals too.
Right.
It's beautiful.
Yes, yeah, beautiful. And it really creates this feel that you're in a completely different place, a different world, and a very fully realized different world that sees itself as the main world, and you as something other and weird and far away. And it kind of crescendos when they take you from shows all visual, no one's talking yet. When they show all these interesting things. They show you whales, and with the eye of the whale, and these things that I am forgetting what they're called, the beautiful sort of what's the word,
what do you call them?
Right, exactly. What's escaping? But anyway, they show a bunch of beautiful animal life under the sea, and plant life and coral, and then a crescendo comes, and you start to see the people, right, the mer people, and then ultimately Triton's castle and everything. So it's just really effective visually and musically, taking you into this, this new place.
I feel like we should probably just get it out of the way, because John Webster is going to talk consistently about this. The music. Come on. That opening sequence, and then it goes into the fathoms below sea shanty style music, and man, Alan Menken and Howard Ashman just killed it with this music. It feels so nautical. I don't think there's a much better word for it, but like it works. It's just so upbeat, and it's so it does feel exotic, and so you feel like you've been transported to this other place that's fully realized. And especially since Sebastian himself is the court composer, they tie you to the music through that character as well. But
I always laugh about that, because I have such love for the film Amadeus, and so these are really the only two like films that I can recall that I've heard the term court composer, which is, you know, fairly, you know, it's not like it's a made up term, but it's just funny that they set up this sort of society in the way it is, and that there is a court composer for King Triton, and it just cracks me up that Sebastian has that title, and he's so proud of his piece that he's about to unveil, and it, poor guy, it goes so wrong.
Can we just take a moment to appreciate the fact that the court composer is tasked with babysitting a teenager for this whole movie?
So glad you pointed out, because it was so jarring to be reminded of that when I did the rewatch for this. Like, wow, that's so weird. So, and you know, okay, he trusts Sebastian more than anybody else. So, and Sebastian who brings it up and everything, but still, that's so odd. He's the king. He could assign anyone to this. And he's on Sebastian, this little crab who's the composer, whose expertise is it couldn't be any more different from that, and who would hate that job. But a couple of things about the music. First of all, yeah, the variety in it is really interesting. You know, Kate mentions right at the beginning, you've got two very different kinds of things, and probably intentional, right? The people on the boat singing this sort of sailor song, which really feels like a sailor song, and then a radically different type of music once you get right from that Under the Sea, totally different, and then all other different kinds of music. You know, it was Sebastian. I think the original idea was that he was going to be British, and it was one of the two, Menken or Ashman, who had this genius idea. Let's make him Jamaican instead, and have music be influenced by Jamaican, you know, influences, and so there's that. You know, like one of the signature songs, Part of Your World, and then two of the others, Under the Sea and Kiss the Girl. If you sort of group Under the Sea and Kiss the Girl and contrast them with Part of Your World, I mean, you can't get more different. And yet they're both kinds of song are completely essential to the movie. So that's one thing I want to say. And then the other thing about what you're talking about, both of you, that it's so interesting that the Sebastian character is this composer. You've got these great composers, Ashman and Menken, creating this great thing, this signature thing that's going to be associated with them, that's going to launch a whole genre of movies. And they put themselves into the movie very meta with this major character, this indelible character who himself is this great composer, this perfectionist, and his compositions are a big part of what the movie's all about. You know, he wants to do one thing. He wants to have it, this set piece at the beginning. It's all ruined by Ariel, but then Ariel inspires him to create Under the Sea and Kiss the Girl, these two things that I have to think end up even better than the thing he was going to do originally. So it's really, really interesting that they do that. And maybe that's why Sebastian is such a great character. He's
so much fun. And originally, I think his name was supposed to be Clarence. And then I guess they found Samuel E. Wright, and they thought he would be Jamaican, but apparently the accent that the voice actor went with was Trinidadian, which is interesting, especially considering where the movie is apparently set. And yeah, I just thought that was funny. And oh goodness, I forgot what I was going to say on top of that. But yeah, just the Calypso influence was so striking. And oh, that's the thing is, by making Sebastian a composer, they've worked music organically into the story, right? So, you know, when Kiss the Girl happens and they're in the lagoon, he's just like, ugh, I guess I'm going to have to do this myself. And then he kind of recruits all the animals, and they're like, percussion, strings, winds, words. It's just like, because he's a composer, it seems so natural.
That's a fantastic point, Kate. That is such a great point.
But you know, I have to say, a little rude of him to take the moment away from Scuttle, who obviously, you know, he's very gifted. I think.
I know. And can I just point out that Scuttle? I still think that Flounder is is kind of like a level B, a grade B character. You know, he's whatever, fine, not that interesting. And I thought that Scuttle was a little more interesting than Flounder, but just far from Sebastian. But I have to say, I didn't realize, Scuttle is sort of low-key the hero of the whole movie in the end, because for so much of the movie, he's totally incompetent. And so much of the movie is about changes and development, transformation, and, like Sebastian's arc, I hope we talk about, because that to me is one of the most fascinating things in the whole movie. Sebastian is this really interesting character who really learns and changes and adjusts. But Scuttle is just totally incompetent. He's wrong about everything. He's like this old guy, it seems like. Oh, I don't know, Bird, how old he is in Bird age. But he gets everything wrong. He doesn't know anything. And he was aware that he gets everything wrong. He just doesn't care. And, but then in the end, when the chips are really down and everyone's life is at stake, Scuttle, first of all, is the one who unmasks the Sea Witch. He sees that what she's doing, that Vanessa is Ursula, and alerts Ariel to that, which is what sets in motion everything good that ends up happening. And not only that, but Scuttle is the one who gets Ariel's voice back. He pulls the seashell off of Vanessa.
Which, by the way, that is such a gorgeous marriage of visuals and music in that moment when she gets her voice back. I love the way that's animated with, the lights and the glowing and her voice, and it's beautiful. I caught myself on a lot of these streams, like saying something and then following up by saying, I love it, but it's true. I love it.
We do this because we love it.
You're right. You're right to do it. And I'm glad you do it. And in this case, it's just so true. That moment is an incredible moment in the movie. It's really sort of the climax in a lot of ways. There's the denouement and there's all the fighting afterwards and everything. But to me, that's the beautiful moment that ends those 3 days, the time when Ariel goes without her voice, a very important part of the movie, but that part of the movie needs to end. She needs to get that voice back, and she does.
But sorry, this is where it would help if I actually edited these, because I've just lost my train of thought.
Because I didn't do that 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. But I forget where we were before we started talking about that.
Music,
yeah, we were talking about the music.
Normally we're like counting the seconds until it's just like, oh man, this is some kind of record since John talked about music, but we just kind of opened it with this one.
Yeah, exactly. When it's the main focus, I can't just fill the spaces with it, guys.
It's a musical. It's so central to the entire plot, especially considering one of the major characters is a musician and the other's a singer.
Oh, no. Okay, now I remember what I was going to interject with. That's what I was thinking of. It ironically was not the music, but you dissed Flounder, Bronte, and I feel like, I feel like I'm taking that a little personal, because I feel like in the story, if I were a character, I would so be Flounder.
Well, that's a you thing. But the minute John said it, I was like, yup. When I was watching it last night, I was like, he's cute and he's fun and like he's a good character, but he feels a little flat in comparison to Ariel and Scuttle and Sebastian. Like the fact that Flounder feels flat compared to the inept seagull. Like I don't know what to make of that.
Well, at least and first of all, John, I think that you're selling yourself short, because Flounder just isn't, you have a lot of Sebastian in you and other characters, that Flounder, I think, Flounder's not going to create a podcast or he's and as Kate says, I think he's a little flat, at least with certainly with Sebastian. Like he's got a ton of super interesting things going on. Ariel is obviously this incredible character, and even Scuttle. At least you feel like what Scuttle is like. He has this interesting personality, and
I absolutely love the word dinglehopper. I just have to say, it's brilliant.
Yeah. And Flounder is like, what is Flounder like? I mean, kind of normal.
He's just there.
Right.
He just exists.
But see, I just love that, like, you know, Ariel's going after, you know, up to mischief, and she's going in, you know, investigating this old ship and stuff, and he's just like, Ariel, we shouldn't be here. And I'm like, that's me in most, like, dangerous situations. I'm like, can we just go back, please?
Oh, I would definitely be like that. You're right. At the very beginning, I totally identified with him because I would have been like, I'm out of here.
I mean, you can identify with him, but then you have to realize, you know, in terms of the other characters in the story, he doesn't have much of an arc. He's just sort of stable the whole way through. But can I just also, have you ever seen anything so wonderful in your entire life? Just a little twirl here and a yank there, and boy, you got an aesthetically pleasing configuration of hair.
Yeah. And that's before they even get to the pipe.
This is the first, like, 10 minutes of the movie, and you're just like, I'm sold. I'm invested.
Yeah.
And, like, he's, like, he pulls off, you know, not a convincing argument, but he pulls off an argument for the dinglehopper. But then what he's trying to do with the pipe just doesn't, he can't make music with it. So he's like, I don't care. We'll use it for something else.
Right. It's so funny when he's like, well, maybe you could make a planner out of it or something.
But the funny thing is, too, that, like, not only is that just, like, a funny moment in itself, but it pays off later because Ariel believes him. And then she ends up blowing tobacco in Grimsby's face.
Totally. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting details about that. One little
one
is
talk about a different age of Disney, just seeing a, you know, a tobacco product.
Oh, that's such a good
80s,
point.
Man. The 80s.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think of that, but you're right. And what was I going to say? So even before the scene with Grimsby, when she first sees Eric, and there's this really funny little back and forth between Ariel and Scuttle, where Ariel's like, he's so beautiful, and Scuttle's like, I don't know, he looks kind of what's the word?
Was it hairy or something?
Hairy, and
because he was looking at Max.
Right, he's looking at Max. He's looking at the dog. Right, slobbery. Right, he looks kind of hairy and slobbery to me. And Ariel's like, not that one. The one who's playing the Snarfblat. And I, for years, that line, this is the kind of person I am, bothered me, because I was like, he's playing a flute, you know, not a pipe. Why does she equate those? But I get it. It makes sense, right? She's been told that the pipe is an instrument. She sees him playing an actual instrument, so she just assumes that the word, like the word Snarfblat, isn't a word for is a word for instrument or something, right? That applies to other instruments as well. So I get it. It makes sense. But for years I was like, I don't know. It doesn't really work.
No, that's brilliant. That's just one of those, like, what the hell moments. And then your brain catches up. You're like, oh, okay, yeah.
It makes sense. She's never seen a flute. She doesn't know what it's called. She's like, okay, yes, thing, like other thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's also interesting that seeing you pointed out, Kate, about Grimsby, where she accidentally, I mean, she tries to play the pipe and blows all this smoke in Grimsby's face, and Eric laughs, and then the woman who's there, who's sort of serving the food to them, says something like, Eric, I haven't seen you laugh like that in a long time. I feel like this is the movie maker's heroic attempt to get Eric to pretend that Eric likes Ariel for any reason other than her looks. But even this attempt doesn't really succeed, because what Ariel didn't reveal something about who she is. She just made an error, right? That wasn't, Ariel was trying to do one thing but did another by accident, and that's the thing that provokes Eric left. So it's not like, oh, he sees something about Ariel's character and likes it. No, it's just a mistake.
She just does something stupid, and he finds it humorous, and doesn't see a problem with the fact that she did something stupid.
Right. And the stupid thing she does it's not like, well, it shows that she's silly or something. She's not trying to be silly. It's just that she's gotten the wrong information from Scuttle.
Yeah, it should be a red flag to anyone else.
Yeah, and if that wasn't a red flag, maybe, driving the cart like off a cliff and jumping over, that's like...
Right, which he also loves.
He just hops right on board with that. He's just like, yeah, that was awesome.
Right. That's super dangerous. I was reminded of the movie Speed. You guys ever see the movie Speed?
Yeah.
But I get the point.
Right. So, where the bus flies. That's what it's like. The carriage flies. She practically kills both of them in her one day with him.
And I'm probably digging way deeper into this than most people would, but there's a similar element in the film, in the Disney movie Frozen, where I can't recall the characters' names, but two of the characters are riding in a cart in that film, and they're having a conversation about how the girl has fallen in love with, who ends up being the villain, and the guy in the cart is like, you just met this guy. And so I feel like that's a great commentary on movies like this, where it's like, we like it because it's an older Disney movie, and that was just the thing. But yeah, she did just meet the guy.
It only took until 2013 for Disney to realize that people don't meet and marry in 3 days.
Oh my God. Well, that's okay. I have thoughts about this. I think we should talk about this. I also want to point out that, John, I think you're talking about a scene with Anna and Kristoff.
Yes. And please forgive me. It's like my brain is totally in Little Mermaid mode right now, so I couldn't recall who any of the characters.
You know what's funny? I haven't even seen that movie, and I probably could have guessed that. And by the way, we need to watch that movie.
Yeah. I'm actually... We're talking about it now. It's going to be in the past tense by the time people see this. I'm going to go ahead and schedule it for Friday night, which is, we're recording this on Thursday, so it'll be tomorrow night. Frozen is happening, okay? Or to the people watching this, has happened. Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed it the way that we obviously will.
It was fantastic yesterday when we watched it.
We're never going to let it go.
Oh, very, very nice.
Which don't get me going. I'll get the lyrics out right now and sing.
I don't need the lyrics. I will belt that song to you right now, but I'm not going to, because this is not the stream.
Impressive.
I know. Like, I want to launch into a full-on discussion, but like you said, this is not the Frozen stream. This is the Little Mermaid stream. So I'm going to resist the impulse.
Yeah, so the subject that I think got us into this was this thing about meeting and getting engaged right away, which, yes, is exactly that. John's so right with the reference. It's just the conversation that they have in Frozen. And it's interesting in Frozen because Frozen does a good job with that, right? Unlike with The Little Mermaid, as Kate said, that Kristoff and Anna are having that conversation in Frozen about Anna just not getting to know the guy who she had already gotten engaged to. And that conversation is a part of Anna getting to know Kristoff in a way that she hadn't with the other guy, which is pretty important. Turns out if you don't get to know someone, and they might not end up being who you thought they were. So, so The Little Mermaid, right? I think, as John alluded to at the beginning, right, if Amy were here, she'd probably be talking a lot about, and rightly so, issues surrounding, you've got this central part of the plot where the heroine, the main female character, loses her voice, right? She can't talk at all. And the central thing that drives the plot is how she's supposed to get this guy to fall in love with her, even though she can't talk, because, as we all know, nobody cares about whether women talk or what they say. It's just, their looks. This is problematic, deeply problematic, and deserves significant talk. So before
get your drinks ready and your bingo cards out. Patriarchy.
But at the same time, Ursula is not necessarily wrong in her observation of many men.
Totally. And that's an interesting thing. It does show some awareness of that. Like, Ursula is the bad guy and is voicing this, right? And no pun intended, right? Ursula basically says.
So, some people in the chat are going, Ursula is not the bad guy. How can you say that? I think she counts as a villain because of
she's
a number of
villain.
things
Yeah.
she does. But at the same time, like, I get the commentary around, like, there's people who go, Ursula did nothing wrong. I think she did, but yeah.
I mean, look, it's interesting, that sort of totally alternative view. We don't know the backstory, right? Why was Ursula? Maybe Ursula was wronged. Who knows? In the past, before the movie started, and that's why she was thrown out of the palace or whatever. But Ursula has dedicated years and years and years to turning people into plants, and basically enslaving them.
By the way, like, how freaking creepy is all that stuff? Like,
it's even worse than the original Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. And speaking of, Frozen was also based on a Hans Christian Andersen story called The Snow Queen. So very apropos.
But every time I watch this movie, I'm like enjoying all the great music, the pretty visuals of the animation, and then it gets to Ursula's little slaves.
She's fabulous, but like there's so much creepy stuff with her.
Creepy. Yeah.
Those things, and then this is jumping ahead a little, but at the end, when she reverts from Vanessa back to her normal form and she crawls like the girl in The Ring, like she's coming at you, and then she grows, and spoiler alert, at the end of the movie when he pierces her with that broken, I don't even know what those are called. This would be a good moment for Kelly, but when he pierces her,
that's what I was thinking. We definitely need somebody nautical on
this
stream. It's a shame.
I don't have the expertise for this, but when he pierces her and she just like explodes in this whole thing of lightning, and I'm just like, every time I watch this, it's equally horrifying. I know what's coming, and it's always horrifying.
I do want to actually take a moment just to, I just mentioned we should have had Kelly on this. I find it so funny because I jokingly threatened her with, oh, by the way, Kelly, you're on this weekend's stream too, because she's always saying that I just assume that she's coming on, for a stream, and I never give her a heads up. And I just find it hilarious that in this occasion, we really actually could have used her on here, but
you're so. Oh, go ahead, Kate. You were.
I was just gonna make a quick quip about the fact it's like, we were planning this to be at the end of March, and it's now May, and so it's just like, this was such a, last minute thing. I totally did not plan for this at all. There's been no preparation, no pre-thought, no planning, nothing.
So, I want to say, kudos to your point, Kate, about Ursula when she changes from Vanessa and how she sort of crawls really fast at Ariel. That's a great moment that I hadn't, thought to mention, but it's so true. It's just visually, it's very scary and exciting and kind of horrific. And just the way Ursula moves, it's compelling in a scary, horrible way. It's primal, right? When she turns into herself again and she goes after them, and but also to sort of return to the thing that got us into Frozen and everything about how they fall in love so quickly and everything. So I put a lot of thought into this, and that's embarrassing because it will result in me saying totally, stupid and banal things. Banal at best, stupid at worst. So here are my thoughts. You guys tell me what you think. I feel like, okay, I don't have a problem with all of these characters basically falling in love at first sight, because I think people do fall in love at first sight. People, whether we want to admit it or not, often, we make sort of snap judgments that we may not even have access to. They might be like sub-rational, often based on looks, but also based on whatever else is just the snap judgment about someone. We see them in whatever context we see them, and it's like a yes or a no in terms of initial interest. And that obviously happens repeatedly in the movie, not just Eric feeling that way about Ariel, but Ariel feeling that way about Eric. She doesn't know anything about this guy, and she tells her father she's in love with him. and then obviously also Eric with Vanessa. So it happens 3 times. Now with Vanessa, it's a little different. The voice.
She enchants him.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's an interesting. We should talk about that too at some point. What's going on exactly with the singing?
Have you ever heard of consent under the sea? Like,
wait, what are you referring to, Kate?
Like consent, you know, just the
whole. She
like
does
a
not
love
get
potion.
Eric. She doesn't get Eric's consent, definitely.
Right,
because he's enchanted. Have you ever heard of you?
Yeah, but that whole thing is really interesting. Like, what's going on? Why does Eric decide that? Because he decides in a theoretically unenchanted or rational moment that whoever it is who rescued him and has that voice, he's going to marry. Why? I mean, okay, I understand gratitude for being rescued, but the voice, and yeah, she's got a beautiful voice, no doubt. It's a central part of the movie, but that's the whole decision-making process is a little weird.
Well, there is this whole thing of like, you know, you're coming out of like unconsciousness. There's this absolutely, you know, beautiful, breathtaking vision in front of you, and you know, she's got this, you know, phenomenal voice. You know, I think he is enchanted in a less literal sense. So I think that, and it's a Disney movie. So
yeah, and that's a good explanation. I think that's right. Well, what I was just going to say was that all of that you make a good case for that part of it, and I think it's fine that they have, you know, them fall in love based on just, you know, initial reactions to each other. However, as Kate said before, the thing that they really did not need to do, they could have changed the movie with slight tweaks. They didn't need. It's one thing to fall in love at first sight. It's another thing to get married at first sight, which is what they did. It's all about marriage. It's all about, because I think while it's normal and fine for people to decide they want to start dating someone based on these first impressions, it's not normal and great to decide to commit to the whole rest of your life based solely on those first impressions, which it basically is. You know, like you want to get to know the person, and then they might be compatible with you, may not. You might like what they have to say, you might not. But go ahead, John.
I don't disagree with you, but I will say I did rather like the spin that this movie puts on the traditional, you know, father telling his princess daughter, you need to, you know, like, get married. It's, in this case, it's the boy being pressured to get married. And I thought that was a nice sort of spin, you know, putting it on a male character as opposed to traditionally we see that with female character. Kate, I can tell you were about to.
It's true, because they do flip that a little bit, but at the same time, with Ariel's bargain, both in the original fairy tale and in this movie, there's so much riding on the marriage that it's not just a marriage for love, but there's also, especially, have you guys read the fairy tale, the original?
I haven't, no.
Oh, okay. How am I the only one who's read this? It's darker, less cheery. The ending.
Wait, are you really saying that Disney lightened up a fairy tale for one of its animated
I know,
films?
it's wild.
This is incomprehensible.
Are you saying that being turned into sea foam is a bad thing?
Yes, I am. Well, in the original fairy tale, you know, there is, strangely, more agency for the Little Mermaid. She's not named Ariel in the original fairy tale. She's the one. Okay, in the movie, Ursula manipulates her. She figures out that Ariel is infatuated with Eric, and she uses Flotsam and Jetsam to prey on that and lure.
By the way, some great names,
right? Right. So, you know, she manipulates the situation to get what she wants, which is revenge on Triton and ultimate control over the seas. But in the fairy tale, Ariel, the Little Mermaid, approaches the sea witch of her own volition, thinking that what she wants is, she learns from her grandmother, who's absent in the Disney version, that mermaids live 300 years, but then dissolve into sea foam, whereas humans have a shorter mortal life, but have immortal souls. And so Ariel not only falls in love with the prince, who does not also have a name in the original fairy tale, so she wants not only to enjoy human interaction, human love, human eroticism, but she also is like, you know what? An immortal soul sounds pretty cool. I want that immortal life. And so she's the one who approaches the sea witch and makes the bargain. And the sea witch in the fairy tale is far less manipulative. She still is. She creates that like false ticking clock, like, oh, you know, thank God you came to me now, because if you had come any later, it would be another year until I'd be able to do this for you. Oh. Like a skeezy car salesman being like, you came on our one-day sale kind of vibe, right? But so in the fairy tale original version, she wants the marriage, but she wants it because it will grant her a human soul, which will allow for immortality. So the Disney version glosses over the entire religious underpinning of that whole, you know, man and woman join, become one, and he grants upon her with his love an immortal soul while losing nothing in the process himself, obviously. And she gains and he loses nothing. So they skip over that and are just like, no, marriage is the best thing that can happen to you. And so we're going to set up this whole thing so that the 16-year-old can fall in love with the prince. And, you know, the crab can make that happen.
You know, that's really interesting. And you're so right that there's this huge thing going on in the movie where as you said, so much is riding on the marriage between Ariel and Eric. So many other things, right? The least of which, but still a really big deal that we don't really think about much, is what John said about the pressure being put on Eric to get married, right? The kingdom needs Eric to get married and to create an heir. That Grimsby, who is, you know, a nice guy, like Grimsby is the only one who's sort of got his eyes on the prize. He knows this is very important for everyone. Everyone needs Eric to find someone and get married. Eric's not doing it. I've been trying to, you know, give him opportunities to do it, give him people who he might like. He doesn't like any of them. And he keeps saying, oh, he'll know, it'll happen. And then he gets obsessed with this woman who Grimsby doesn't believe exists. And Grimsby, you know, has every reason not to believe she exists. She seems like a ghost or something. And Grimsby's like, how about you marry this woman who's great, who's right in front of you, instead of this, you know, theoretical person. So there's a lot of pressure.
Which, by the way, let's also take a moment to appreciate that he doesn't really ask any questions about her. Like, who is this girl? Where does she come from? Yeah. Doesn't matter.
He doesn't care. Like, he doesn't.
I found it so interesting upon a rewatch last night where Grimsby is actually trying to point Eric in the direction of rationality, just like, she is gorgeous and you like her. And like she's great. You could have that. But it's like the dream girl versus what's in front of you, and it's like, okay, this again. But
yeah, and Eric, who sort of appreciates Grimsby but mostly has been sort of saying no to him, finally agrees, right? Grimsby finally prevails upon Eric to do it. And Eric kind of realizes Grimsby's right. Ariel is great. And I mean, not that he's heard her say anything, but he likes her. And he's going to do it. He's going to propose to her before Vanessa, you know, seduces him with Ariel's voice. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, right. So there's this pressure on it. So it's very important to the realm, you know, for Eric to get married. That's riding on this from Eric's side of things. But from Ariel's side of things, so much more is riding on it. Her very life is riding on it. And ultimately the life of Triton and everyone under the sea. So she has to make this happen. And it's interesting. It's sort of the Disney kind of lets you just accept that it's this love story and it's all about love. But in a lot of ways, Ariel's real love is to be a person, is to be a human, is to be on land. It's amazing how, like, that cove of stuff, right? The whole thing, the very first scene in the movie, she doesn't show up for the concert that's supposed to star her. Why not? She's looking through a shipwreck with Flounder to take the fork and the pipe, and she brings the fork and the pipe back to this cove where she's been doing this, and there are so many human things there that you realize it must be years and years that this 16-year-old has been looking at every shipwreck and gathering stuff and bringing it back. Her whole life is about getting on land and becoming a person. This is everything to her. And so Eric, in a way, is almost secondary or a means to the end of that. That's that she has to get to land and become a person. And that's what's riding on for her. That's the upside. And the downside is like basically death or slavery to her and her father and everybody else.
And just to take that like one step farther, like when you think about it, it's sort of like this undertone of consumerism and the female place in capitalism, where it's just like, you need a man to get you the things because you have no agency. You can't have a job. You can't have a life or a career outside of a man. So, it's this thing where it's like, not only is Eric someone that she's like, oh, you're so pretty. And like, yeah, I could hang out with you. We could kick it. But he's also her path to this material world that, the society she lives in doesn't really produce anything. They're very much so, Sebastian says it in Under the Sea, where it's just like, up there, they work all day. Out in the sun, they slave away while we're devoting full time to floating. Like, they're not a consumeristic, productive, quote unquote, society. And so Ariel wants to be part of this materialistic world because she's just like, I don't see how a world that makes such wonderful things could be bad. Like, right? And so it's this strange moment. Also, can I just point out, last night I went really slowly through that grotto scene. I kept pausing it and like taking snaps. And she has a ton of books. And I'm just like, that's not how paper works. Like, I love it. I love that she's into the reading, but water's not good for paper.
I just, this is one where John started this podcast with asking, do you believe a man can fly? There are some things where, and maybe it's irrational which things you choose to do this with and which not. Some things where I feel like I'm just willing to suspend disbelief for the purpose of making a plot thing work. And here's one where I'm glad you pointed that out, Kate, because you're totally right. It doesn't work at all. We'd have to, the books would have to be laminated.
This is what I'm constantly talking about, though. It's like, at what point do you draw the line on the things you're willing to go with? It's like, if you look at like sort of medieval epic movies, every war speech you've ever seen is unrealistic because 99% of the army would be going, what's he saying?
Yeah.
If you look at Lord of the Rings, there's a scene in the beginning of the extended cut of Return of the King when Gandalf and the rest of them are talking to Saruman, who's on the top of a tower. I mean, first of all, to get nerdy, you can rationalize hearing him because Saruman has a like magical, voice basically. But I'm talking about vision level. It's like Gandalf's looking like at an angle like this. Saruman is like all the way at the top. He should be like, hey, let's talk. So there's a lot of stuff in film which you just kind of accept as like a cinematic convention, and this falls under that category of, I know those books should be like falling apart and they can't be read, but like the movie is like, you got talking sea animals and mer people and stuff. I'm willing to go with the water resistant paper.
It's so funny because like, I'm totally willing to buy into the singing crab, but as someone who's interested in book conservation, I'm just like, oh my God, those books need to be frozen like right now before they develop mold. Like,
it's so funny.
It's a personal thing.
It's one of the thing with the books It's possible that they just didn't think about the problem, but I think it's maybe more likely that somebody did. They put so much time, effort, and money into thinking about this movie. It's very possible that they confronted this and someone was like, we can't have books there. It doesn't make any sense. But someone else was like, we have to suspend disbelief for that, because without the books there, Ariel just wouldn't have the vocabulary she does. She knows human words. Like, to sing Part of Your World, she needs to say human words that she would never have access to. So, and yeah, once in a while she'll like hear them on a boat, like the key scene, but clearly she's not doing that all the time. So they need the books there for her to be able to talk the way she does.
Yeah, like I have no problem with it. It's just like a thing that I have as someone who wants to get into like book repair and conservation. I'm just like, oh man, this is this is not protocol.
I'm just picturing you, Kate, watching this and being like,
like literally, that was me last night, being like, oh, this is not. Someone get us a deep freeze. So we have to take apart the text block. All the sheets have to be laid out and pressed and frozen to prevent mildew. Like, this is a whole thing. This is a major conservation project. Because that's how my brain, like, you know, we have in like the next moment, we have a crab. This is something I just noticed last night when I watched this. You know how he sort of like the Jack in the Box opens and he's like bouncing on the springy thing, and he's like got a teacup on him, and the thing around his neck is an engagement ring. Like, I just noticed all these little details last night that I had never picked up on. I'm like, someone lost their engagement ring in the sea, and it's around his neck is like a necklace right now. And so, like, yeah,
I missed that. Wait, who wears the engagement ring as a necklace?
It's Sebastian. Like,
really?
when all this stuff kind of like ends up on him, and like, because he catches her, and she like just notices him because he sets off the Jack in the Box, and it's just like, oh, Sebastian, hello, and he's like covered in human things, and he's got like a thimble on one of his claws, and
I know just what you're talking about.
His neck. Yeah,
I know just the moment you're talking about, but I didn't notice the engagement ring, and that's such a good point, because I like that, even though I still hadn't noticed it. I'm glad you pointed it out, because it sort of brings home the wreckage, the human wreckage of these shipwrecks, right? People probably died in these shipwrecks. The shipwreck we see, people escape, which is great. But in a lot of them, they probably didn't escape. You know, that engagement ring, right? The person probably perished. So it's nice that they at least allude to that subtly.
Well, and also like thematically, by including an engagement ring of all the things in that, it's hammering home this idea of marriage being such a key part of this film. But yeah, now Kate, you've got me thinking about the poor guy who was maybe going to engage to someone who maybe he knew more for more than a couple of days.
Right? It's
just maybe.
Can we talk about the Sebastian character a little bit? Okay.
Please.
My favorite moment of the movie is probably Under the Sea, which of course is also Sebastian. But in terms of the plot or character development, my favorite moment of the movie is when Sebastian sees what's happened, that Ariel has taken the deal with the sea witch. She's there. She has legs. And Sebastian is like, maybe we can still turn this around. I'm going to go back to Triton right now. And, maybe it's not too late to get you back to being a mermaid. And then you can just go back to living under the sea and be like all the normal fish. It's interesting. He uses the charged word normal, which we should talk more about. You could be like all the normal fish and just be, and then he realizes miserable for the rest of your life. And then he changes.
I really hoped you were going to say that, Bronte, because that was such a powerful moment for me, just to see that. It's amazing because the movie starts off and you might think that the Sebastian character might be like a stick in the mud for the whole film, but he really ends up being, the one who really sort of evolves the most, sort of scene to scene almost.
Totally.
He wants the best for Ariel. Like, he loves her and he wants to protect her, and that's kind of why he went off to Triton at the beginning about like, that wouldn't have been the way that I handled things, and that's why Triton puts him in charge in the first place.
Right.
So you see that growth in him, and then it's funny because he's kind of the only one who grows.
Yeah, well, the way he grows, I think, is so. Say Triton, right, is pretty awful in some way. Maybe understandable. People kill fish a lot, which he says, so that's why he hates people. But still, what he does with the cove and all that stuff, not a good parenting decision. It's really bad, really bad. And then ultimately, even then he feels guilty, but still really bad. And then ultimately, obviously, he changes. But that change in Triton evolution is much more ham-handed. It's right. It's
very sudden.
Right.
It's with Sebastian. It's so organic throughout the film.
Exactly, organic and gradual and really interesting. Sebastian never does the kind of big gesture thing that Triton does, destroying things. It's really subtle all the way. Like right from the start, Sebastian is at the beginning on the side that we're not really rooting for, right? He's with Triton against Ariel doing what she wants to do and being free. But he's an interesting character, right? He's super duper talented, right? He's gonna make this great music. He's totally dedicated to his craft and fantastic at it. And he's strict and rigid and thinks that he's mad at Ariel because she won't just do what she's supposed to, and he totally agrees with Triton, who's his benefactor and his king and everything. And then little by little, he sees Ariel and he feels bad about when Triton does this terrible thing to Ariel. He feels bad that he sort of unwittingly sold Ariel out to Triton.
And that's the thing. I actually kind of forgot that he doesn't purposely sell her out. It's by accident. And I really like that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. He's been smart from the beginning, and he's a reasonable person. And so after seeing all the things that we see, because that's a great, as Kate said, right, it's crucial, albeit it doesn't make any sense. It's crucial that he's the one assigned to spy on her, because we see the movie in a lot of ways through his eyes. We're watching Ariel. He's watching Ariel. And so he like us, he sees the reasons to change, and then he's able to do it. When it really is crucial, changes, and he thinks, you know what? It just doesn't make sense. My whole way of looking at the world is wrong. Ariel shouldn't be under the sea. She should do this other thing that she wants to do, and I should help her, even violating everything that Triton, my king and my patron and my friend and everything, wants me to do and has assigned me to do. I'm not going to do that. It's an amazing moment.
Now that we're talking about this, I've just had a revelation, and I think maybe Sebastian is the protagonist of this story, because you're right. We see so much of this through his eyes, and he kind of is the one who has that revelatory moment in that change, whereas Ariel is always a good person, and she's just sort of like this object. Welcome to Disney movies. The woman is an object. Hello. So she's there. And again, Eric is established very early on as a good person. Like the fact that he risks his own hide to go back to get Max off the burning ship just shows his character. And, King Triton goes between authoritarian jackass and loving father. So he's a whole thing. But Sebastian is the one who has these revelatory moments of, you know what? She's different. She's not meant for this world. Maybe she would be happier somewhere else, and maybe she can find happiness in this way. And he helps her achieve it. And so we get it from, the opening moments of him coming in after Triton, and then he sings Under the Sea, and then he's part of Les Poissons, and then,
we're gonna get into that. I do, because in a minute we're about to go ahead and do the mid-roll, so I want to save that for afterwards.
Yeah. But point being, it's his arc, and he's the one who's just sort of narrating it and watching Ariel and whatnot. So she's the object and he's the protagonist, and this has just hit me, and I'm like, oh, this is a whole paradigm shift that I now have to contend with.
You're so right. Intellectually, he's by far the most interesting character for all these reasons that you guys are pointing out. He's so crucial and so fascinating and so much at the heart of all the things. And you're right. It is great that you pointed out the thing about Les Poissons, because that's a big undertone in the movie, the whole thing of people killing fish, and we're people watching the movie, and that they don't shy away from that. And Sebastian, as you say, is right at the center of that as well, at the center of everything, really. What's an interesting question is, I think that even though we love Sebastian, and I think everyone loves Sebastian probably, he still is number two, right? The first thing everyone's going to think about is Ariel. And it was an interesting question. We were able to articulate why we're so interested in Sebastian. I find it harder to articulate, but I wish we could find a way to do it. What is it about Ariel that captures everybody's imagination? Because it does, and me included. Like, I saw Ariel and I was like, I love this character and care about this character in a way that I didn't care about, say, Aladdin. And I love the movie Aladdin, but Aladdin himself, he's fine, but like Ariel, it's this kind of indelible image of her, that she's something. And what is it about her that makes her so sort of magnetic?
I think I love Ariel for the same reason I love Rey from the Star Wars sequel. She has such like an unbound spirit and enthusiasm and just sort of brightness in her, sort of, not her personality, but again, her spirit. Like, just you can feel that from the character. And so when especially when she's singing part of first part of that world and then part of your world, it's you just get excited because she's so excited, and because she feels that so much. I mean, it's like one of the big climactic moments of the film is that's the reprise of part of your world and this moment. And I think it's such a thrill because she's embarking on this new, what she feels is a new chapter and a journey that she's about to go on, even if at that point she doesn't quite know how that's going to materialize. But yeah, I think that's why I respond to her so much, but it's not as easily like verbalized as with a character like Sebastian. Yeah.
I think part of the issue too is that, like I said a few minutes ago, Ariel doesn't really change throughout the course of this movie. She doesn't have any real moments of personal growth or revelation or whatnot, but that doesn't mean she needs to. Like, she's a good mer person. She has a solid moral core. She has an adventurous heart and spirit. She doesn't do anything morally questionable. She doesn't, I mean, I don't want to say she doesn't need an arc, but at the same time, like,
I think
don't mess with it.
I think from a more contemporary standpoint, we might say that she does need more of an arc, maybe to discover that she doesn't need to go after the guy she just met. But from a standpoint of the late 80s, like, yeah, it is what it is.
I think, from the standpoint of moving past that archetype of the woman needs the man to save her and marry her so that she can continue to exist in the world. She does need an arc. She needs some initiation more into this human world. I think I haven't seen the second Little Mermaid, but I know that like they have a child together, and there might be more growth there that I need to analyze. I haven't had a chance to do that, but from a moral standpoint, she doesn't have to go like. When you look at someone like Tony Stark started out as,
you were just waiting for this.
I was waiting for this. But he starts off morally questionable. He's an arms dealer. He makes weapons, and he comes face to face with the consequences of his own actions, and he becomes a better person. Ariel doesn't need to be a better person. She needs to be maybe a more self-actualized person. She needs to be, fuller in her womanhood, perhaps, and like accepting all of her agency. But from a moral standpoint, she doesn't need to get better.
Right, true. And that is the
Yeah.
way you could say it, to the extent that there's an arc with her. It could be that. It could be a kind of coming of age arc where she kind of takes control of her life, because it is a kind of a classic story that's very relatable, I think. Ariel is 16, right? She and she actually does know better in this case than her parent, right? She knows who she is and what she wants, and who she is and what she wants is totally unacceptable to her father and her society. That's a major theme that could resonate in all sorts of ways with the ways that we could think of, right? The person she wants to be with, the person she's falling in love with, it's not okay. Not only is he not okay, but his whole kind is not okay, right? The whole category of person he belongs to is verboten. You're not allowed to do that. That's it. You should be like the normal fish, right? You should be normal like everybody else. And she's not, and so she's feeling the oppressive forces of her father and her society, and that's very relatable, and she needs to kind of escape from that, and she does, in a way. It turns out through means that cause a lot of difficulty for her and everybody else, but she does take matters into her own hands. She escapes from it. She gets to being on land, and she's totally a fish in water, pun intended, when she's on land, right? She has this day with Eric where she's dancing and everything. Like, this is clearly who she always was meant to be, and she gets it. She achieves it in the end through herself, through her own efforts. So there is at least that going on.
And there is, like, if you look at it as what she actually truly wants is to become a human and to live in that world, no pun intended, then does it really matter if her marriage to Eric works out in the long run? Like, it's kind
of because it's the 1830s.
Yeah, that's true. But like, the important thing might be that she became human and she's now, living amongst them and doing human things. So maybe that's the more forward-looking victory of Ariel.
It's interesting because it's like, Anderson wrote this original tale in the 1830s. It was published originally in 1837, which is right at the start of that Victorian era. So you get that, religious, moral underlying everything. But, it was kind of strange for a fairy tale, because if you look at the things that come before it, it sort of changes from that aristocratic, princess, very passive, finds a man, like she's saved by a man. Whereas now we get a little bit more of like a romantic association with it, a little bit mystical. And it's part Bildungsroman, which is more of a male trope, but it's mixed with that marriage plot. And so you're like, this is new, this is different. There's this new sort of masculine element to it. She has some agency of her own in her decision to seek out the sea witch and to become a human, but it's still tied to the responsibility of the man to take the initiative and make the marriage proposal and save her immortal soul, literally. And so it's this whole other thing. But it's interesting how they sort of took this thing that was sort of different for its time and made it work for the 1980s as well.
That's a great point, Kate. And just to combine the point you just made with a point that John made earlier, they do flip things in a way, because you're right, you've got the Bildungsroman, but it's not a young man who's coming of age and figuring out how to be a grown-up. It's a young woman who's doing that. And what's happening with the young man in the story? Well, he's being told, you got to get married, you got to get married, you got to get married. That's the only point. It doesn't matter who it is, just get married, because you don't count unless you're married. So in a way, they do flip the gender roles for that.
Yeah, welcome to the world. You don't count unless you're married. Get married or die trying is basically the moral of this story.
Now, I just want to press pause on this because I really do want to do the mid-roll when we're actually near the midpoint. So anyway, this coming up next weekend. So far, the plan is in celebration of Amy's birthday, we're going to be talking about Mulan, which she said she's going to be taking over the podcast next week. So
This is Amy we're talking about.
So expect me to just be quiet for most of the time while she just goes on about all things Mulan and China and everything. I really don't think I'll have much to add. But and then to be honest, I really don't know exactly what we have coming up after that because our schedule has been kind of a mess of late ever since we took our break and we've come back. I think we're doing Atonement with Keira Knightley. So which Amy has already said she's going to have some complicated thoughts on that one. But yeah, so I don't know. You guys doing anything that you want to plug? Kate, I know, like, you're starting your own channel and everything, right?
No. One, I was gonna say, just to, the human world, your scheduling, it's a mess. But no, here's the thing. I don't have a channel. I don't necessarily intend to have a channel. If I did have a channel, it would probably be me trying to struggle through bookbinding. But there's a lot of.
We want to see that, Kate. We really
you want to
do.
see me swearing at book cloth and like acid-free glue? Yeah,
Yes.
maybe. That if I did a channel, that would be it. But mostly I'm just guesting on these people's channels because it's way less work and effort because I don't have to edit or learn how to use technology in any more difficult capacity than I already use it. Now, I mean, I suggested to Stephen that we have a Marvel Love podcast, excluding John, obviously. Just
feel free. I'll be tuning out of that one.
Okay. My screen is my porthole is causing me problems. I can't figure out where John is. Yeah, you're not invited. I don't know when it's gonna be, but that'll probably be the next time you see me on anyone's channel because unless John has something else and he's like, I'm desperate for a guest. Are you alive? Okay. That's pretty much how these things go. I didn't know how to do film or literary criticism until I met these people. So until they asked me to do things, I just float in the ether and don't think about stuff.
Hey, I am very happy to have spread the movie bug to other people, but isn't it worth it though, Kate, for like when you came on and we had the Mean Girls discussion, just to hear me recite Gretchen's big Caesar speech? I mean,
yes,
isn't that just worth everything to you?
It is worth everything. And that also reminded me that I had an epiphany earlier today. As I mentioned at the start of the stream, I'm pretty sure, like, unless I saw this when I was too young to remember, I saw this movie when I was 18, which means I probably saw Mean Girls first. So we are literally regressing in time. So, yeah. But it's funny because Steven, after we had that stream, he was like, I never realized there was so much depth to Mean Girls. And I hope that we achieve that same level of analysis with this movie so that people realize that there is a lot more depth, pun totally intended, to children's fairy tales.
Yeah. And also I want to ask, you have a place where people can reach you, or are you like Jenna, like, no, leave me alone?
I'm very much like Jenna. I mean, like, I'm technically on Twitter. Good luck finding me. I'm on Instagram. if you want cute puppy pictures, every so often I repost my sister's Shorky. He's pretty cute. Good dude. But other than that, I'm incredibly boring. So Ontario is still in lockdown, so I really have like nothing to offer you besides being on other people's channels and talking about children's movies.
Yeah, and well, there will be more to come in the future because we're not done with Disney, for sure.
I feel like in 2 weeks you're going to have to do Beauty and the Beast because you're going to be out of ideas. And I'm going to be the only one available.
Bronte, are you working on anything right now?
Well, the only real fandom or social or media presence I have at all is in the context of analyzing symbolism in Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. And so I have a YouTube channel, Bronsterys, name that made videos about that a long time ago. Maybe they'll be made again. Who knows? I've written a couple of essays about it on a website called Red Mice at Play. I'm on Twitter at Bronst6, but mostly to the extent that I do anything there, it's engage in a few conversations here and there about analyzing the symbolism of those books. So really, all I do is once in a great while field and eagerly accept your invitations to come on and talk about movies with you, and it's so nice of you to give me those invitations.
Speaking of which, there's a little movie from the 70s, which, kind of flew under the radar and nobody really noticed it, called
Flew under the radar, John. Flew under the radar.
Floobermon?
Flew under the radar.
Yeah.
Floobermensch?
Superman.
Superman with an umlaut, right?
That's it. Which, kind of your favorite movie.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I love Superman 1, Christopher Reeve, and what was it, like 1978 or something? So it was
Yeah.
I did not see it in theaters, but I don't know. I love that movie. I did see it as a child, and on TV or whatever form we had back then to watch movies, and I don't know. I love it, and so much I've realized, John, through you that and everything that you do in talking about movies, how much of it was the music. I didn't realize that, but that is a fact. And so now I appreciate it even more in a different way. And so yeah.
I think you are literally the only person I've succeeded in getting to buy something from La La Land Records, which they have like a treasure trove of expanded, scores and soundtracks and all that stuff. And there's a absolutely beautiful little box set of the score to the original Superman film that we're talking about, and it's like fully remastered, the best the music has ever sounded. And I sent you a sample track of like the opening main title, and that's how I got you, and then you ordered it. So I'm very, very happy. Now if I could just talk these other people into getting some stuff, but they're all like, they make fun of me, physical media.
I don't even own a CD player anymore, bro. Like, can't help
like,
do you have a Blu-ray? Do you have a Blu-ray?
No, I don't.
Buy one. Just
everything I do now is streaming on my laptop.
Boo. Sorry.
When I get the right setup again, hopefully I'll have my big screen back up, and I do have a DVD/VHS player that I bought that must have been 2010, because 2009, 2010, something like that. My hard drive crashed, and so I bought a DVD VHS player so that I could watch movies while my computer was being fixed. And that's all I've got. But everything else has been streaming.
I need to buy you that box set of the John Williams Harry Potter scores, and then in order to listen to it, you'll be forced to buy something to
They're
play
all
it on.
they're all on my Apple Music.
No,
that is
no.
how I listen to things. Is on my Apple Music. So
No, these are the full, complete scores. They've got like every piece of music from the films, which you will not find on the streaming versions. So, yeah. And I'm talking to her like she cares.
right?
Because everybody in the world is as obsessed about film music as I am, clearly.
I mean, it's good. I just I have other interests too, John.
That's weird. That's
like
weird.
The
Kate.
MCU. Like the MCU. I don't
Yeah,
We'll
we're
get
gonna
there.
move on. We're gonna move on from that. Okay, so we can dive back into the Little Mermaid. Yeah, so were we talking about Sebastian and other musical numbers that he is involved in? Which I do have to say I really love the actor who plays the chef. Not that he's got a lot to work with, and like it's one little bit for this, but the actor in, oh my god, I am never gonna get this name. I've never figured out how to pronounce his name.
René Aubergenois.
There you go. Took care of it
I'm
for
Canadian. It's a thing.
Amazing.
Okay. The reason why I say I love him so much is because he's a very versatile actor that if any of you have seen Star Trek Deep Space Nine, you know him as Odo. And he's been in other stuff from like The Patriot and just Boston Legal as well. He's just a great character actor, and so whenever I see his name in this, I'm like, I get so excited, even though he just, it's not the most like in-depth performance, but he is hilarious.
But it's just such a funny song. Like when you look at the actual lyrics, it's just like it's hilarious but horrifying at the same time. Especially, I'm a vegetarian. I have never really liked or eaten meat. And so to watch this scene as someone who, doesn't enjoy the animal slaughter, it's just like, like to chop and to serve little fish. Like, first I cut off their heads, then I pull out their bones. Like,
So I'll say toujours delish.
Oh god.
Right.
It really is very sadistic if you just just like state the lyrics.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing is like, I wonder how many people watched this movie and became vegetarians because of it, because it is so. Cause it's one of those things where you're meant to sympathize with the sea life, and you're meant to sympathize with Sebastian, and then the chef comes in. It's just like, and I chop off their heads. It's just like,
right, with a cleaver, I hack them in two. Yeah,
this is a human, well, not a human, but like a living being with, bonds and a life and whatnot. I mean, I don't know how crabs interact with their family in real life, but like, it's one of those things where it goes beyond crabs, where, cows show emotion, chickens show emotion. They are sentient beings, and we're just like killing them with no thought, as if they have no emotion. Or
we get a whole bunch of decapitated fish heads.
Yeah, like they just show that like the head's flying through this head. I'm like,
right. There's this thing hanging over the movie, which is, this is a movie made for people. Human beings are going to watch this movie, and we're going to watch this movie that's all about all this life under the sea. And these people who are watching the movie are almost all going to be people who spend a lot of time eating fish, and thereby creating a market for killing fish, killing all these creatures that we're watching a movie about. And the movie realizes that, and sort of arguably like increases its how much it's going to expose you to that fact and say something about that fact. And so now it doesn't, it's not like preaching at any point, but the message is there if you want to see it. So at the very first thing in the movie, the very first thing, is you see a fishing boat, right? You see a boat of people who are catching fish, and you see the fish they catch. And what takes you under the sea for the first time is that the fisherman is holding the fish, and it slips out of his hand and goes back to survive. And the fish is super relieved that now it's going to live instead of die.
I was cracking up watching that, because it's like you see the immense relief on the with the fish, but then he's like, okay, back to my day. And the way it's like, dude, you just almost got eaten. Like, just give yourself some time to to absorb that.
Yeah. So right from the start, there's this. That's a great point. That there's this exposure to this central kind of point that we're watching a movie celebrating life under the sea, and we kill all this life under the sea. Then it comes up again early when Triton explains why he's totally against Ariel going to the surface. It's because people kill fish. I don't want you to end up on the end of a harpoon, right? So it's dangerous. Don't do that. People are dangerous. And Ariel's all about how, people are great. They're not all bad and everything. And yet, now obviously Ariel is right. I'd like to think that, look, you guys are wonderful people. Like, there could be people can be great and have great things about them. Ariel's right.
I mean, kid me in the late 80s was like, yeah, people are great. Me today watching this, I'm like, he kind of has a point.
Well, Ariel's saying some people are great. Kate doesn't eat fish, so maybe she qualifies. But yeah, as you say, John, Triton's got a point. Like, people do a lot of terrible things. They do a lot of terrible things to fish, and so there's that. And then, so you have the beginning thing, you have the opening thing, you have Triton talking about how people kill a lot of fish. That's why he hates people. And then you have this scene with Renee Aubergenois, where it is so over and so rightly, it's over the top, but correct. Like, this guy is a chef, and he has a passion for killing animals, like Sebastian has a passion for music. And it's interesting that these two passionate artists confront each other in life and death moments, where the art of the chef is to kill the characters we're rooting for.
And again, it's like you were saying before, it's ingenious that, like, music is such an active element in the films, with Sebastian being a composer, and you got this composer trying to escape being eaten by this guy who's singing gleefully about what he's doing, and it just brings the music in to the forefront in a way that you might not have had if you didn't, like, actively make Sebastian a musician.
And it's so, like, I'm gonna read you the lyrics because I've got them here in front of me, and it's like, Sacre bleu, what is this? How on earth could I miss such a sweet little succulent crab? Quel dommage, what a loss. Here we go, in the sauce, and some flour, I think just a dab. Then I stuff you with bread. It don't hurt because you're dead.
And you're certainly lucky you are.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be hot in my big silver pot.
Tout à l'heure, mon poisson, au revoir. Like, goodbye, little fish, because you're dead, so it doesn't matter what I do to you. It's this ethical consideration of just like, oh man, I'm friends with all these fish, and now they're getting eaten.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I feel like it doesn't get any better, then he tries really hard to kill him when he realizes that he's not dead yet. Yeah, it's so gleeful and so horrifying. And it's interesting because arguably the movie sort of serves it in a more palatable way, lots of puns intended, by making the song kind of the comic relief, right? So it's presented in a comic relief way, that the beat of the song, it's kind of fast and it's a funny scene and everything. That's how it's presented. But this life and death commentary on the potential evil of all of us watching the movie, except for Kate, or of most of the people watching the movie, even more so in 1989 than now, but certainly still now, this commentary comes through in a way that's simultaneously very, very graphic and hard-hitting, and also leavened by the humor in which it's presented, I don't know what to think about it. I think that maybe they wanted to make the point, but not have people feel like they were being, preached at in a heavy-handed way. So whether it works or not is an interesting question, but it's
humor is a great way to like. It's like tackling that is going to make your audience very uncomfortable. So the way to do that is to make it, absurdly, hilarious, while at the same time, as we've said, the lyrics are, sort of terrifying. But it allows the audience to sort of feel better about, laughing at it and sitting through it while still absorbing,
the message. Fish are friends, not food.
Why the British accent?
It's not British, it's Australian.
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's Finding Nemo, rather. The shark is Australian.
Yeah, I recognized that I couldn't. My brain wasn't working right, so I was like, "God, what is that from?" I know it. But,
it's Bruce the shark in Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, right now people are like, "Damn it, John, you can't recall all these things from other Disney movies. Are you a fan or not?"
You're just a giant poser. You know nothing about movies.
I've been found out. Really, I don't know the first thing about movies, which is exactly why I'm doing a movie podcast.
I thought I would be the one found out on this podcast. I was perfectly ready for that eventuality.
Can I ask a factual plot question that I've always wondered about? And I feel like it's not clear what the answer is. I think that almost everyone thinks the answer is one thing to this. I kind of think the answer is the opposite. And I want to know if we have a definitive answer or what. And maybe Kate knows from the story. Here comes the question. Sorry for the long lead up. Suppose Ariel had succeeded in getting Ariel to kiss her, getting Eric to kiss her within the 3-day time frame. Does Ariel get her voice back or not?
That's, again, I'd have to, here's the thing. When you look at the contract that she signed with Ursula, it's sort of like, the part you can read at the top says that she'll give her voice. And then you can't read it. And when they do close up on it, it's gibberish. When you look at the bottom, it's like, for all eternity. So part of me wants to say no. Part of me wants to say that she can only retrieve the voice if she can retrieve the shell in which it's housed. But that's utter speculation.
That's my view, which I feel like most people just assume that she would have gotten her voice back if she had gotten him to kiss her. I mean, I don't think so. I thought that for me, my understanding is that voice is the payment for what Ursula is making happen. And that's
for the legs.
Yeah, exactly. For the legs.
The legs, but not the voice.
Right. And it's a separate part of the deal that Ursula also gets her as a plant slave forever if Ariel fails in her mission. But even if Ariel succeeds in her mission, she still has to pay for getting this thing from Ursula. And that payment doesn't come back to her. At least that was what I thought.
That's the consideration for the contract. And this is why you have a lawyer on the stream with the Deal with the Devil contract movie.
I've never heard that word before in this context, Kate. Consideration. What does that mean? What area, what field are we talking about?
You know.
How do you know, though? How do you know?
I studied law as a minor at university and did some... when I lived in BC, I worked at a mortgage fulfillment company. So in order to get your submortgage broker license, you had to take a course, part of which had legal components about contracts, negligence, all that kind of stuff. So you learn about consideration in that. So,
nice. Yeah, that's my world.
Yeah. So that's why I was like, someone will finally know what that word means. But yeah, it's just that moment is very it's the deal with the devil. And Sebastian even calls her a demon and a monster. Ursula is not meant to be considered sympathetically at all, ever, in this movie. She is just the older, ugly, jealous woman archetype. And
what?
Patriarchy.
Oh,
I was going to say,
yeah.
Bronte, you should have known that one.
Oh, so I just didn't hear right here, but right.
It was more of a mouth. I didn't actually say it.
Yeah.
I mouthed it.
There's one moment where, and I guess John made me aware earlier in this episode that people see Ursula as not the bad guy. There's another way of thinking of it, which I think now that he mentions it, I had heard before. But, and you know what, you could manufacture an argument, but I completely agree with Kate that we're meant to see Ursula as the bad guy. It's not meant to be that layered, right? She does the whole plant thing is terrible, and it's not like they're happy being plants either. They're miserable. I mean, they're absolutely miserable. And what was I going to say? Oh, it flew out of my mind. Oh no, we were talking about Ursula being the bad guy. Oh yes, I got it. There's one moment where I feel bad for Ursula, just a second of visceral, feeling. And I don't think anyone does anything wrong here to her. But can you guess what the moment might be? I can give you a little hint.
Yeah, I'm giving myself away.
It's near the end. It's late in the game.
Is it when she's Vanessa?
No, it's when she's trying to murder Eric with Triton's thing, and Ariel pulls her helmet or her crown and redirects the shot, and she inadvertently murders Flotsam and Jetsam, and they die or kill. So Flotsam and Jetsam die. They're the people, and she's like, my poor little poopsies. She loves Flotsam and Jetsam, and she kills them because Ariel kind of makes her do it. And so there's just 1 second where there's this pang. I don't know. They're like either her pets or her friends. She really cares for them, and they die, and you really see it. So, and at her hand as well, inadvertently. So there is that one moment.
Yeah, you can read her as the result of the situation and the society in which she comes from. And you can sympathize with how she became the way she is, but she's not meant to be read sympathetic. Like from the beginning, they play her as also problematic, fat and lazy, demonic,
lazy.
Well, like, when it's the very first time we meet her and she's like lounging in that sort of like shell thing, and she's like, I've been here and I've wasted away to practically nothing, but she's still voluptuous. It's just like, well, if this is practically nothing, then what were you before is the insinuation with that comment.
Yeah.
And so they're insinuating that she's been eating a lot and being lazy, and she's like, I've wasted away. So they're playing her up as this, not sympathetic character, and then straight up literally calling her a demon and a monster. They're playing her as obviously evil, but everything from her plotting to get Ariel to fall in love with Eric and to manipulate her, and the Poor Unfortunate Soul's song. There's other than that moment you mentioned with Flotsam and Jetsam where she loses any stroke of humanity.
But also the thing with stories like this is you can also always, if you step outside of the actual film itself and the story as you're being told, you can step outside of it and be like, this is actually a version of a story being told by by the so-called good guys of the story and the patriarchy overall. In the real version of the story, actually, she is the good guy.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just she is the subversion of the patriarchal ideal. She's single, she's female, she's sexually empowered, she's, she does her own thing, and men don't like that. So
right, and for all we know, she was rightfully the queen of the ocean and got usurped by a guy, Triton. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that would be an alternative version. It still doesn't justify preying on all these innocents to make them her plant slaves.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like in this version of events and what we're shown, yeah, she is a villain, absolutely. I'm just saying there is another, version you could tell the story where that's all propaganda. It's like she didn't really do that.
It's funny because in a way she is propaganda. Like she is the exaggerated version of everything that the patriarchy hates. You know what I mean? She is powerful, she is empowered, she is in a way kind of perverse, like her whole like body language, and she shimmies, like she is this like version of woman that the patriarchy has never liked. And so that's exactly why they play her this way.
And exactly how they would portray someone.
That's the point. Like they're making her so obviously villainous. And they're making her old, ugly, and this is slightly controversial, but like she's not white. She's purple. So she's othered in the difference in the color of her skin as well. And so she's... they're portraying her as in a very certain way as to be exotic and aggressive and not what the patriarchy wants you to be.
Yeah. First of all, I'm so glad that we're talking about Ursula because she's such a crucial part of the movie, and I think such a successful part. Huge credit to the actress who plays her and to the movie makers for making a great villain, right? We talked about how Ariel is this indelible, amazing character who everyone identifies with, thinks about, cares about, loves. Sebastian is this great character, but Ursula, I think, would be number 3. I think that she is a terrific character, and they really it's funny. Like Kate's absolutely right. Of course, they're making her evil, and it's, as you say, John, that's part of. You could see this as a bad thing that the patriarchy is making her out to be a villain, and it says a lot of bad things. But it's interesting that notwithstanding that, she's so compelling. She's a fantastic character. Like I love watching her. I love the songs. I mean, her Poor Unfortunate Souls is one of the great parts of the movie.
It's one of the greatest villain songs in all of Disney.
Yeah.
So I think that's just Ursula is a great success in the movie. She's super, super, super charismatic. She's and kind of the little nuanced, but she's just, and she has to be charismatic because that's how she achieves what she achieves, right? Not just with Ariel, but with all these plants before her. Before Ariel, she had to get people to do what she wanted by persuading them, and she's immensely persuasive.
And not just within the context of the story, but like Disney movies kind of, in my opinion, rise and fall on how great of a villain you have. And she is one of the absolute greats. And I think especially since this was the sort of, we see this as the first entry of the Disney Renaissance. Like you needed to hit that out of the park with a really great villain, someone who's just a joy to watch. And she is, for all the reasons you've been saying. And yeah, her musical numbers are great as well.
We were talking about this the other night on Zoom, and we were talking about how every song in this movie is just fabulous, but Poor Unfortunate Souls is a cut above the bangers that are this movie. And so, yeah, you're right. She's a fabulous, fabulous villain. She is such a foil to Ariel in every way. She's older and wiser, where Ariel is young and naive. She is considered to be relatively ugly in comparison to Ariel's youthful beauty, which is obviously objectified and desired by all of the men in the story. And
her voice.
And her voice is so like dark, deep, resonant, where Ariel's is light and ethereal and beautiful, both of which are like obviously fabulous ways to sing. But just the difference, the juxtaposition that they created between Ariel and Ursula, that's the where you see, because obviously you're meant to sympathize with Ariel. So Ursula is therefore the opposite and the villain. So it's but they take the villainy to a literally cartoonish place with her. She could have been a subtler villain, even with Poor Unfortunate Souls remaining largely as it is. She could have been less obviously evil and still provided a fantastic foil to Ariel.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's so great what you're saying. So true. All these differences, old, young, naive, or savvy, depicted as ugly versus depicted as beautiful. Voice that's depicted as ugly, though, as you say, it's really awesome.
Pat Carroll. Hello.
Oh yeah, Pat Carroll, that was huge. The performance really was a huge part of it, not just the writing and the conceiving of the character, but her and what she did with it. And it wasn't supposed to be her. They had all these choices before her. B. Arthur, which on paper, I get it. That would have made a lot of sense, but there's no way in a million years she would have been as good as Pat Carroll. Just because no one could have been. Pat Carroll embodied it. The role. What was I going to say? Oh yes. So, they're opposite. They're presented as opposite, and in a way, they're both trying to achieve this goal, and they're committed to it, and they're pitted totally against each other. They're rivals, even for Eric, right? Ursula transforms herself to be a romantic rival of Ariel's for Eric, using Ariel's voice against Ariel. And so they're fighting for this goal that they each have. But it is interesting that Ursula's goal is a little bit more anti patriarchy, or more kind of upsetting the apple cart of expectations for women than Ariel's goal. Ariel's goal is to get married to a man and become a princess as a result of that. Ursula's goal is to topple a man and to become the queen as a result of that. Very different.
And I mean,
which again, like I was saying, if you just take the those sort of skeleton beats of a story and remove the details of of this again version of the story, and just look at it from an abstract point of view, what she's up to sounds like a very good
sounds like a noble goal.
Yeah.
Let's take out the authoritarian king and put a woman in charge.
Yeah. I'm sure she would have run the sea in a very thoughtful and caring way if had she succeeded.
Totally. She seems very level-headed.
But it's funny because if you the way she's portraying the thing she does, it's like they make every effort to make sure that you see her as a villain. It's like you sympathize with her. Well, we're going to make sure that we've really got these, plant slaves really kind of driving home that this is an evil woman.
Yeah, and the horror scene crawling, the lyrics to Poor Unfortunate Souls. But on the whole, I've been a saint.
Right. Oh, yeah, I know. Exactly. The contrast between the Ursula's voice and Ariel's voice, they really drive that home. One is when Ursula says to her, "Your voice," and they make Ursula's voice when she says the words "your voice," referring to Ariel's voice, really super extreme. Everything about Ursula's voice that's caricatured comes out in the words "your voice" when she's talking about Ariel's voice. And then also, of course, when the voice goes back to Ariel. And so Ursula's talking as Vanessa with Ariel's voice, and then boom, it's gone, and she speaks as Ursula again. And so you've got the two voices just juxtaposed super clearly against each other, and it's so jarring how radically different they are.
I noticed when I watched last night, too, that it felt like Jodie Benson was playing Vanessa very differently than she was playing Ariel. She played the voice a little deeper, a little darker, less melodic. And it just, you could tell it had a completely different feel to it, even though it was exactly the same voice, which just goes to speak to Jodie Benson's talent, obviously.
Definitely. It's a great point. It's a great point. And I was thinking about that too. Very noticeable. And it's an interesting choice by her and by the movie to do that, which I really love. Because they could have just had her sound exactly like Ariel. But they were right not to, I think, because how your voice sounds has to do with your intonation and your mood and your personality and everything, not just the tone itself. And not just the notes you're hitting in your singing or in your speaking. And so Vanessa is Jodie Benson, but she sounds like what you'd imagine Ariel's voice might sound like, being piped through the character of Ursula. It's just like you say, it's darker and a little harsher and a little less innocent and naive. It's very noticeably different.
Right. Like I could play my voice totally like a Disney princess, or I could play it like I normally talk and be a little bit deeper. And, I can play the very soft Disney princess kind of voice. It's, I'm no Jodie Benson or Paige O'Hara, but, I can move around basically in my vocal range and play with those feels. Right. And Jodie Benson really nailed it when she took on that sort of villainous role. And I love it. Also, fun fact, I'm pretty sure that Jodie Benson and Paige O'Hara are like really good friends in real life. And that makes me extremely happy.
Who's Pedro O'Hara?
She voiced Belle.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Wow.
Belle and Ariel are really good friends in real life. And that's so cute.
Can you imagine, I don't know just how great it must be for them to like get to listen to each other's voices all the time when they hang out.
Can you imagine their like holiday gatherings? Like just all the good music that flows.
Yeah, right, exactly. When they sing holiday songs. They must be horrified at the thought of the rest of us. Like, what's it like to live like that, where people sing songs, holiday songs, and it sounds terrible?
I just wanted to say, speaking of songs, because I want to start to wind this down because we're getting near the 2-hour mark. And Kate, I think you've already kind of given your choice, but what would you guys say is your favorite song from the film?
The one I sing to myself most often tends to be Part of Your World, but I don't know if that's actually my favorite song. It's between that one and Under the Sea. It has to be. I'm surprised I haven't started singing in this stream. I might have to do that.
It just occurred to me that we haven't talked at all about, well, we talked a little bit, but we haven't really, talked about the Kiss the Girl scene, which, like, honestly, if I'm Eric, I'm like, this is really creepy. What's going on?
Right? Because you're just hearing this cacophony of animals just like screaming at you. And like, in what world is your inner subconscious voice a Trinidadian man? Like, why did you think that was normal? And be like, Ariel? Yeah, that's totally a thing.
Well, it's like, because first they're like, they sort of wave it off by having him go, did you hear something? Like he's registering it, but not completely. But then the fact that he actually says the name Ariel, so he receives that much. It's like, it's like, that's just a thing that you pull out of thin air. Sure.
Totally. They totally nailed the continuity and the understandability of that scene.
But I do love it, and I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, I think that actually is the song that won the Oscar.
No, Under the Sea.
It's Under the Sea.
Under the Sea won the Oscar.
Yeah.
Did it?
We're right about this, John. You will see as you look it up now.
You will come to realize we are correct, and it is Under the Sea.
Well, I actually hope so. Because
best original song.
Because I actually, between those, that's definitely my okay. So Kiss the Girl was also nominated, but it was Under the Sea that won, which good, because that's my preferred of the two songs, because Under the Sea is just such a classic.
Under the Sea is just like one of the best songs ever. Ever.
I think that's the reason I sat there and watched the movie again. I wanted to see that again. I wanted to see that scene again.
Just the animation in contrast with the lyrics and the meaning and the feel of the whole thing was just so utterly unique for its time and still to this day. Like, has anyone duplicated that? I think not. Like,
I'm so glad to hear Kate say it. It makes me feel liberated to say what I think too, which is the same. I mean, that Under the Sea. So my favorite song in the movie is Under the Sea. I think that I can appreciate a lot. First of all, I love so many of the other songs. Poor Unfortunate Souls is fantastic. I love. Yes, exactly. I love Kiss the Girl tremendously. And I love Part of Your World. And I appreciate the fact that Part of Your World, unlike if you think about it, Under the Sea is kind of anti-thematic in a way. It's Sebastian trying to convince Ariel to do the wrong thing with her life. Whereas Part of Your World is totally thematic. It's the thing that expresses what the movie's all about. And, we haven't mentioned that, like, there's a big fight about whether Part of Your World was going to be in the movie at all. Didn't play well with children in audiences. Children were bored by it. And so, yeah.
Katzenberg.
I have so much to say about, like, producers being worried about, like, kids' attention spans and stuff. It's like, please give children more credit. It's the whole reason why, and this is branching off onto a different movie, but with the Muppet Christmas Carol, there's a song in the middle of the film that's between young Scrooge and the love of his life, whose name is escaping me because it's been a while, and I don't. That sounds like, oh, I've forgotten the woman's name. No, Belle. I think her name actually is Belle, which is funny. I should remember that right off the bat. But it's a very crucial song because older Scrooge is witnessing this moment, and it's sort of his emotional breakthrough. It's the whole reason why he starts to let the holiday spirit into his heart, which leads to the whole rest of the film. That song is cut out of the original theatrical version and was only reinstated in the VHS release, but now it's been out again because they restored the film using the original, theater version. And it pisses me off because it was pulled out because, well, it doesn't have Muppets in it, so the kids are going to get bored. But it's like the emotional centerpiece of the film. So it like that kind of thing just makes me so angry.
No, I think it's a good point and a really interesting question because I think if I recall correctly, maybe I'm wrong with this, but I think they aired the Little Mermaid. They sort of screened it, and kids did get bored during Part of Your World and, like, walked out or something. Like they I think they had reason to think it. And you're right, maybe in the Muppet Christmas Carol as well. It might be true that kids would get bored by that. And here you have this huge problem because the Little Mermaid functions as an entertainment for kids, but also as a great work of art. It is a great work of art. Yeah. I will fight people. Like, if people don't have a problem with this, I'm happy to defend that. And so as a great work of art, it must have Part of Your World. It's the most important song for the theme and the plot of the movie, for everything you understand.
The I Want song.
Yeah, exactly. It's the I Want song. It's the song, the I Want. It expresses what the main character wants. And you need it to understand Ariel. And it's also just a beautiful and incredible song in its own right. But it's not visually, it's long, and it's not going to hold kids' attention necessarily the way that, say, Kiss the Girl or Under the Sea do. But having said all of that, for me, Under the Sea is like one of my favorite scenes in any movie. I think it's just incredible, and I love it so much.
And can I also just say, and this is going to be such a sort of guy moment for me, but, like, I can tell you that as a young boy seeing this movie, that song probably appealed to me because it was being sung by a male singer, and it was light and it was fun, rather than, a more sort of emotional song sung, by a girl, which now I'm appalled to admit that I would think something like that. But admittedly, as a young kid, it's also probably kind of, understandable in a way. But that, I think that probably played a role into why, because it was the accessible song for, me being a young boy. But it's also just really one of the catchiest songs,
It is
from any
bright.
Disney movie.
Like the colors are bright. The song is dynamic.
Yeah.
The lyrics are catchy and funny and relatable. It's just like, yeah, you know what? You're right. The seaweed is always greener in somebody else's
And it's
lake.
actually, the song actually has a really, good message as well, which, because we do always think of, everybody's always like, oh, I wish I could be doing this. I wish I could, be in that place rather than this boring, place that I'm currently stuck in. But it is, it's a valuable lesson to learn that everybody always wants, what they don't currently have, and sort of to be where they're not at.
And yet he's totally wrong, right? Ariel, it's not just that the seaweed is always greener. It's that she genuinely, as a part of who she is to the core, needs to be on land. And so it is true that you're right in many cases, and maybe this is the development of Sebastian, right? It's not crazy necessarily that Sebastian, or at least from his perspective, isn't crazy that he thinks that it's one thing. He thinks Ariel just sees that the seaweed is always greener. She just thinks that she'd like the things she doesn't have, but really when she has it, she won't like it anymore. That, okay, plausible, I guess, from his perspective at the time. But he then realizes, no, actually, I was wrong. It's not that the seaweed is always green. It's not that this is some passing fancy and she just likes this other thing. It's that this is who she is. She needs to be, a person on land.
This is why she has the grotto. It's why she's so entranced with all these human objects. She is obsessed, and she needs to at least experience it for herself and make that decision for herself instead of being forced by the patriarchy, her father, her authoritarian father figure, and convention to, stand her the sea. If there are methods by which she can achieve her dream, she should do it.
Yeah. So in a way, like, Sebastian's intention with that song is good. He's just not completely at that point in the story understanding where she's coming from and what's actually inside of her.
But he also is a crab. So he had to be like, he totally doesn't get it, because he cannot probably, I'm guessing, like, I mean, you get the Poisson scene and the him following her around, but like, he is a sea creature. He cannot exist. I mean, technically she can't really either, but it's his perspective of like, this is our world, that this is the only way that it can be. And he eventually learns that that's not necessarily the case. I don't know that Ursula could have granted him a human body. I want to see that movie now. But,
he can walk on land, unlike Ariel.
He can exist on land, but like, he's still an aquatic creature, and so it's like, that's his domain, his comfort zone.
Right.
Whereas Ariel has a little more flexibility, and if only she had legs, she could exist.
And we should talk just a little more about what you guys were talking about before, which is why Under the Sea is such a success, musically and visually. Well, first of all, it's just incredibly catchy, the main melody, but then also they ramp up and up and up the visuals, the end where it's super fast and they just cut fast to all these amazing visuals of, the fish. It's so exciting and spectacular.
And that's a trick that you see, like, that's sort of a signature of, of what would follow in other movies. Like, even in The Lion King, you've got I Just Want to Be King, and which does kind of a similar thing as the song ramps up to its conclusion. It just gets you more and more excited, and and then
Be Our Guest as well, where it's just like fast and flashy.
Oh my god, I love Be Your Guest. Sorry.
Oh, yes. Anyway, different stream, different time.
Yeah. And as you said before, also, it's just so clever with the fish playing the instruments.
The flute player, the newt player, the flute, the carp player, the harp, the plays player, the bass, and they sound and sharp. The bass player, the brass, the chub player, the tub. The fluke is the Duke of Soul. Like, come on. Like, it just goes so fast, and you're like, what are these words? I've never heard most of them, but they're all fish. Like, it's so clever.
Totally. Exactly. Right. I mean, that combination of the outrageously catchy tune and the super clever words and the beautiful and interesting visuals all at once, it's sort of like sensory overload.
Yeah, and I want to circle back around just for a moment, as as we start to wind down. What I mentioned before about the sort of reflection of the light on the ocean floor. What that really triggers for me actually is, and I don't remember it exactly because I was so young, but they had this attraction at Disney. Years back, where it was kind of like a Little Mermaid show that they put on, where they had like, it was something I display where they had people performing like the sea creatures and stuff, but then you also had like this, like, I don't know if they had like the soft rain or something, just to give like sort of a misty, smell of water and stuff while you were watching this, and that specific, like, that memory of sitting there for that is what gets triggered when I see like the animation of the ocean floor and all that. It brings back very specific, like, triggers, memories and smells and just all of that from seeing that show. And that's why I mentioned like Disney World and all that stuff, because all of these movies get like their own attractions and stuff like that. And so it goes beyond just the films themselves. There's an experience and this sort of, a whole bunch of treasured memories that go along with any one of these films. With Aladdin, it's like endless hours playing the Aladdin video game that on like Sega Genesis that I remember playing with my best friend at the time, but that's why it's so great for me going back to a movie like this, just because there's so much bound up in it and so much joy from my childhood, and nothing does that quite like Disney, I think, and that's why I always love these movies.
I think it's really summed up in the line, just look at the world around you, right here on the ocean floor. Like, they give you the ocean floor. They made it for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's and they did so much by deciding to do this. They gave us this movie that we appreciate so much and love so much, and has so many different characters and songs and parts to it that we care about and love, but also they paved the way for all the other movies by doing it and showing that it could be a success.
Yeah, I really love that. Like I said before, I don't have an exact memory of like sitting in the theater and watching this, but I do have, like, I remember because I lived in Maryland, and I remember the movie theater that I always went to at that time. So in a strange way, I remember like the feeling of going and waiting in line for each one of these Disney movies more than I do like actually sitting in the cinema and watching them. I can specifically remember like seeing the Beauty and the Beast like title up on a display while we were walking up to the counter for a ticket. But I can't remember the actual experience of sitting inside the theater itself. So like there's just, yeah, it's bound up with just like these almost indescribable childhood emotions and
indescribable feelings.
There you go.
I have the complete opposite experience because I don't remember like actually going to the theater, but my first theater going experience that I do remember was 101 Dalmatians, and I remember being in the theater with like my best friend at the time's little brother, and he was scared by Cruella de Vil and was crying. Like we were 5 or 6 and he was 3 or something, and it was too loud and too scary. And so that's my first theater. Like I remember being in the theater. I don't remember posters or hype or lines or anything like that for anything except 101 Dalmatians.
I also, speaking of that theater though, and this is completely veering off, but I also remember the experience of trying to get tickets for Batman Returns, because when we went to that theater, the tickets were sold out for the showing we wanted to go to, and we actually had to drive to a completely different theater just so me and my friend could see it on opening day. My mom was was driving us to different theaters to make sure that we got to go see it. So, but yeah, it's funny how I have such vivid memories of waiting in line at that movie theater. It's funny the things that stick with you. I don't know.
I actually remember that too for the movie before Batman Returns, for Batman, you know, Michael Keaton, and Jack Nicholson, and which I think, John, you and I and Stephen did a stream about. Yeah, that was such a phenomenon. Because it was one of the first, I mean, followed Superman, the one that we're going to do a stream about, but it was one of those first huge blockbuster superhero movies. And I remember I saw it on opening day, and I remember getting there hours before and waiting in line. It's funny the details you remember, because I remember that the forecast called for rain, and there were some people in line who intentionally stood a little back because it was under an awning, and they were like, we're the really smart people because we'll be protected from the rain. But it didn't rain after all, so I was happy. I was just, you know, ahead of them.
So as we're winding down, just any final comments you guys want to say on the movie? Anything we didn't touch on?
I mean, there's so much we didn't touch on. I could go on for literal hours about all of the patriarchal BS in both the movie and the original fairy tale. But you know, again, just gonna.
It's like if Triton had just come to that final decision like earlier in the movie, couldn't we all have been saved a lot of grief?
Right. I'm just gonna restate my love and just be like, just love it. Just, it's problematic, but I still love it.
You mean
it's a good? I mean, like, it's problematic in the sense of like Ariel's not much of an actor in her own. Like she starts out acting as though she's, you know, the initiator of her own life, that she's an actor, and she's rebellious and she's, you know, single-headed, but in the end, it's still all about, oh, the man will save you. So that's problematic from a overarching standpoint of Disney, like what Disney is teaching young girls.
And
but
right,
it opened the door for Belle, who was even a step better, and for later on Mulan, and then Merida, and then, you know, so I can appreciate that it started a bigger trend of Disney princesses who at least.
And then we get to Frozen, which you're going to see tomorrow night or last night.
Right. Yeah, that it's a good point about all of that. For sure, and all that and more, with everything with her not being able to talk, and so that, and John, your point, so true, right? One thing that hits you when you see it is such a shame that Triton didn't just get with the program at the beginning. If he could have just made everything good happen right from the start, and we wouldn't have needed all of this. Having said that, had it gone like that, all those people would have been condemned to be plants for all eternity, and instead they got freed.
That's true. That's true.
That's true. Silver linings. But it's funny how like we've been talking over 2 hours and like there's still so much we could talk about in terms of like we barely touched on the fact that Ariel doesn't have a voice for most of this movie.
Did we? Yeah, I mean that's
it's been alluded
like
to. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we've been talking about. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, that's not great.
We've just been gushing about other stuff. There's so much more we could talk about, but we don't. We just don't have the time.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's just not a very good thing. I'm watching the movie, and it's like, yeah, there's a good chunk of this movie where Ariel just can't talk, and
she literally has her agency and her strongest value removed, and just has to try to make someone fall in love with her quickly with no voice. It's good times.
Right, and he totally does. Decides he wants to spend the rest of his life with her. And we see them together having fun, to be sure, the day they spend together, but not exactly having fun in ways that reveal in an unspoken way who Ariel is and what she's all about. Obviously the easiest way would be if you could talk, but if you can't talk, maybe there are other things you could do that would show who you are, but they don't really do that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's important to say, like, it's certainly not that you can't develop a substantive relationship with somebody, even with that obstacle, but not in under 3 days.
And not only that, but you're right. They could have given us more of their actual relationship. Like, fun is important. Marrying your best friend is important. But at the same time, it's just like, was there no deeper compatibility between these two that actually made them a good match? And why could we not see what compatibility looks like instead of just like, you're so pretty and you're so pretty and we have fun together? And marriage is the best fate that you can have. So just get married.
Are you saying that's not all there is to it? Okay.
Yes. Shocking, I know. But
Disney has taught me differently, Kate.
Right? But
Disney
that's
movies
the
said
thing.
so.
Like Disney, because we're dealing with the end of the 80s. We're dealing with like late second wave feminism. We're dealing with women who are more empowered than ever, but still the children are being fed this narrative of literally the best thing you can do is just get married. Like, this will solve all of your problems. And that's it. As opposed to showing us an actual roadmap to what a healthy and happy relationship should be. It's like, now they can't talk for 3 days and then they're in love and they get married. Congratulations.
Right. It was so hilarious that like a certain subset of the audience, I won't say who, got really upset at Frozen when it subverted all that stuff and said something completely different. I'll leave everybody to guess which parts of the audience I'm talking about and which maybe political affiliation there is, but like, yeah, it's breaking away from these, established ideas, and it was long overdue, and like,
and still not enough at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, go ahead, Bronte.
Yeah, right. I mean, just agreeing with everything you said. The taking away her voice, which of course is central to the plot, right? There's no, would have been difficult to not have that be in the movie, but by doing it, it's just so stark. It hits you so strongly that they've removed the primary way that he could learn what she's really like,
Yeah.
what she's all about as a human being in a way that would be essential, that would matter so much to whether you would think they would like spending the rest of their lives together. That gets taken away completely. So, and as you said, John, like, it's not impossible that they could find some other way to reveal who they really are to each other and learn about each other, but that doesn't happen. The time frame is very compressed. They only have 3 days. They do have fun during the 3 days, but not in a way that really lets them show each other who they are and what they're all about. So, and because their voice is gone, we know for a fact it's not like there are these deep conversations going on off screen. Like, there can't be, and it doesn't matter. And sort of the position the movie takes on this is totally fine. Well, this is how it should be. There's a little self knowledge of it with Ursula talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's but mostly,
But
so
it's
The men
having
up
it
there
both-
don't like a lot of blather.
But it's having it both ways. It's like, okay, we've shown that we're aware of it, but we're still going to lean into it as well.
That's exactly the problem with the message of the movie. It's just like, you're trying to be subversive. You're trying to, give off the impression of this empowered female, but you're just failing.
Right.
You're just not actually advancing her at all.
And the other thing they lean into, and I get this was the first time they needed to sell the movie, needed people to watch and like it and everything. I get it. But the other thing they really lean into is the physical attractiveness of both Ariel and Eric. Like, they are unbelievably good looking, both of them.
They're cartoon characters, and the thirst is just unreal.
Yeah. I mean, everyone talks about it with Ariel, the more famous character and everything. So, but just as a straight man, I'll talk about it with Eric. Like, that guy is off the charts. It's really jarring. It's like, whoa. Because when she's talking to Scuttle about it at the beginning and, they're arguing about it, it's like, yeah, yes. I get it.
Going even a little bit deeper than that, too, is the dichotomy between the attractive and the unattractive and the connotations that has for the good versus evil.
Oh, nice.
And the moral underpinnings of the story of, like, Ursula is old and ugly and bad, and Ariel is young and beautiful and good.
Right.
And Eric is attractive and a good person. So
you're so right. You're so right. Yeah. They do, by the time of Beauty and the Beast, they have Gaston, so that does change.
Yeah, but there's still issues with even with Beauty and the Beast. It's like, again, like, taking some steps forward, but there's still some issues. Something that's always caught me about the opening prologue of Beauty and the Beast is I'm looking up the lyrics right here. Oh God, where is it? Okay, it's talking about the enchantress and the spell that's cast on the prince, and says, and when he dismissed her again, the old woman's ugliness melted away to reveal a beautiful enchantress. And they actually changed that in the live action Beauty and the Beast, where it's the old woman's outward appearance melted away. It's like, yeah, just because somebody's old doesn't mean like they're ugly.
And not only that, but at the end of the movie, the Beast reverts to his handsome princely form. And it's just like, okay, so what are you telling me about? So it's like, he's good, and now he deserves his attractive form. And Belle, as a good person, also deserves a man who's handsome, but also good, as opposed to the man who is handsome and not good. Like, what are you teaching kids about, inner beauty if you just revert the Beast to a beautiful human form at the end?
And the only beat of that is like moving in like trying to make a positive statement about that is the fact that she's actually a bit wary of him at first. And it's not until like she looks into his eyes and sees that it is him that then she relents. But still, it's a small moment in the larger sense of still he got to be attractive again.
Adam's still hot, y'all.
And like, and so it's like, okay, so don't judge a book by its cover so long as that book is really fine by the end.
So long as you can rebind it into something prettier.
I'm glad I know this is the Little Mermaid stream, but I'm glad we talked about this because I have a thought about this with Beauty and the Beast, exactly this topic that I've really, I've always wanted to say, and here I get to say it. I get why this happened. The movie, it was like we were talking about before. They had to sell it to children and everything. They wanted the movie to be short. And they had all these great set pieces that they rightly fell in love with, the Gaston song and, all these other songs, stuff with Belle's father. And they're right. All that stuff was great. And so they felt like they had to keep all that in. So what they took out was almost any development of the relationship between Belle and the Beast while he's a beast, which is the whole theme, supposed to be the whole point of the movie. And it's gone. It just doesn't exist. You don't see why.
What about something there?
Where it is, where you'll find that is in the remake with what is it, Emma Watson, I think?
Emma Watson. And,
the remake extends a lot. The movie, it's much longer, and what it does is it puts in all these scenes where she likes him and sees what he's like, what his character is like, and so that can express what's supposed to be the main theme that it's beauty isn't skin deep. Beauty is like what you act like, how you act. That's in the remake, the live action, but not in the animated version.
But the animated version is perfect.
It's beauty. It's a great look. Best soundtrack, incredible songs, incredible movie. I love it too. I'm just saying they had to make a choice about whether to make it longer or not, or whether to take out amazing stuff that they had. They didn't want to take out the amazing stuff. They didn't want to make it longer, so they took out the relationship.
John and I are going to come to physical blows on a lot of things, but the perfection of the Beauty and the Beast is not one of them.
Yeah, I'll let you have your opinion on that, Bronte, but but that's only so we don't come to physical blows.
At least something there exists where it's like we can get the exposition from Belle where she's like, there's something sweet and almost kind. And so like you can see her developing.
But we see almost nothing he does, almost nothing that he does that shows something sweet and almost kind. I mean, maybe a little bit of shyness. The one thing is the birds. It's just the birds. And that he's a little awkward and shy with her. Those are that's it. The birds is one tiny thing.
Like I'm a solid human being and I still can't get birds to come other than I went to this provincial park in BC where the whiskey jacks are very used to people, and so they will come. Like if you've got oatmeal or granola or something, they will come to you, and they will. And I was like Cinderella moment, but that's the only time. And I'm like, come on, birds, I respect you. Come hang out with me. And it's like this bear creature gets the birds to come to. I'm like, this is not how this is supposed to work.
Bronte, I'm just gonna say, don't underestimate the power of the montage, and under which many things are supposed to have occurred under the umbrella of the montage.
Yeah, all I'm asking is in the montage, show stuff he does that's good. Other than the birds, we don't get any of it.
He gives her the library, and he mimics her soup eating, or no, she mimics his soup eating. I don't know. He's humanized throughout the whole thing.
He gives her the library is a good one. That's true.
That is the ultimate
you don't want to say shit about the library scene.
Men take note
with the present company, Bronte.
Oh,
if I'm not if I'm not given a library as part of a marriage proposal, game over. Game over.
Taking a note.
A whole library.
Although, we also had this conversation on Monday. If you give me the ring on the end of a katana, there might be a chance. I'll say yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Bronte. That's a whole conversation that you want
to does he have to include all the books, the person who's going to marry you, or just the like the physical space to house your books?
A little bit of both. I mean, I have a lot of books. So like the space has to be there, but I mean, the architectural space is a really good start. The vaulted ceilings and the huge windows.
All of you viewers who are future suitors, take note. Take note.
Just so you know, I am Canadian. My citizenship is a hot commodity. There's already an open, active competition for my hand in marriage. So if you want to get in on the, Survivor style challenge show to win my hand, you can apply at the following address. Proceeds to not give out the address.
I was going to say, I thought you didn't want to give out any contact information.
It's not that I don't want to give out any contact information. It's just like, if you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you're going to be profoundly disappointed. There's nothing there. There's nothing good.
Okay, since we veered off into Beauty and the Beast and then just went off the rails, I'm going to say that we're probably at an end here. Since we've already covered that Kate is pretty much inactive, Bronte, where can people reach you?
Well, let's see this. If you want to watch old videos about Game of Thrones, you could see the Bronsterys YouTube channel, or if you want to read essays about the symbolism in Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, Red Mice at Play, WordPress website. And on Twitter, I'm at Bronst6. You won't see much interesting there from me, but occasionally I talk about Game of Thrones symbolism and Song of Ice and Fire symbolism.
What if I just start tagging you and everything that I post? Will that get you to be more active?
Oh, you probably shouldn't do. But I appreciate the thought. Thank you. I'll let you know. Maybe I'll change my mind about that at some point.
Okay. So anyway, as for next week, it turns out that while we've been doing this, there's a slight change of plans. Next week, I have to go solo on the show. So I don't know what's coming up next week. I'll have to let everybody know. Might just do something random. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it will be. I have to do some. So we'll see, but I will let you guys know what's coming up, and and thanks everybody for watching, whether you're watching the premiere or listening to this as a podcast. Make sure you go on iTunes and give us a 5-star review, because 5 stars is all you're allowed to give. It's a problem with the software. It just is what it is. So 5-star reviews only. Make sure you do that. I see all of you who haven't done that yet, and I'm wondering, like, why? You clearly are saying you don't care about me with that. So that's all I'm saying. Okay. Thank you all for tuning in, and see you next week. Have an excellent night. Thanks, guys, for coming on. This was so much fun.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.